A U.S. base has just been attacked. Iran has launched a direct strike, and the world is bracing for what comes next. As military forces mobilize, one question is louder than the sound of jets taking off. Is this the beginning of another war, or the moment we choose a different path? And in the middle of the chaos, we turn to an unexpected voice, not from a war room, but from the pages of faith. Kathryn Kuhlman, who believed that when the world breaks, heaven is still speaking. It began with a flash in the sky, then a noise that broke the silence of the early morning hours. In one swift and calculated move, Iran launched a direct strike on a U.S. military base, shattering more than concrete. It shattered any illusion that tensions were easing. It shook military families out of sleep, split open foreign policy assumptions, and marked a day when history would again shift beneath our feet. This wasn't just an isolated act of aggression. It was a message, pointed, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. For those stationed at the base, the experience wasn't political theory or diplomatic drama. It was raw, terrifying reality. Incoming fire doesn't ask for context. It doesn't wait for commentary. In the blink of an eye, lives were turned upside down. Young men and women who enlisted for duty found themselves praying behind barricades. Sirens screamed, protocols kicked in, but nothing prepares the heart for the moment it wonders if this could be the end. The fallout of this attack stretches far beyond any single base. To strike an American military installation is to challenge America's posture, pride, and promises. Iran knew that. This wasn't a miscalculation. It was a confrontation, one that demands a response and has the potential to set in motion a chain of events that leaders across the world had hoped to avoid. What we're witnessing is the movement from rhetoric to reality, from threats on paper to blood on the ground. The line between deterrence and war has just grown dangerously thin, and the consequences extend in every direction, geopolitically, economically, morally, and spiritually. The world is watching. Allies are waiting. Enemies are calculating. And citizens, everyday people just trying to live their lives, are left wondering what tomorrow will bring. This attack isn't just a military event. It's a moment that peels back the layers of our global uncertainty. It reminds us how fragile peace really is, how even decades of diplomacy, defense agreements, and international coalitions can be shaken in a single act. It reminds us that underneath all of our progress, there's still a deep undercurrent of distrust, of old wounds left untreated, of pride that overrides prudence. And yet, in the midst of the media coverage, the maps, the statements from world leaders, we can't afford to lose sight of the people. Behind those helmets and uniforms are sons, daughters, husbands, wives. They are not chess pieces on a geopolitical board. They are human. And tonight, some of them are missing. Some of them are injured. Some of them are never coming home. You won't hear all their names, but their sacrifice is real. Their courage is real. And for countless families, this day will now mark the moment their lives were divided into before and after. But for all its devastation, this moment also brings clarity. It strips away the filters. It forces us to look directly at the state of our world and ask, what are we becoming? What is driving our decisions? Wisdom or fear? Justice or vengeance? Are we still open to seeking peace? Or have we decided conflict is the only language we understand? And it is precisely in the wake of war that voices like Kathryn Kuhlman's echo with strange but necessary contrast. Because in her world, a world of healing, of faith, of miracles, the loudest power was not destruction, but restoration. Her message wasn't about ignoring reality, but transforming it through the power of supernatural hope. And while she spoke in auditoriums, not battlefields, her words have never been more needed than they are now. Because while weapons can level buildings, only hope can rebuild hearts. Policies change circumstances, but only faith changes people. And in moments like this, when the world teeters on the edge of escalation, what we need more than ever is clear-eyed courage. The kind that chooses peace not because it's easy, but because it's the only way we last. No one's pretending this isn't serious. This attack is an open challenge. It cannot be downplayed. It must be responded to wisely, deliberately, and with the full weight of responsibility that such a moment requires. But our response must be more than fire for fire, missile for missile. It must carry purpose. It must defend the innocent, uphold justice, and most of all, it must resist the irresistible pull toward endless war. This moment, painful as it is, can become a turning point, or just another page in a book of unending conflict. The choice isn't only up to generals and presidents, it's up to all of us to remember what's truly at stake, not just political leverage or territorial lines, but human lives, entire futures, and our shared hope for a world that doesn't always solve its problems with blood. Because before the next missile is launched, before the next decision is signed, we must remember that some things once broken don't come back. As the world reels from the recent attack on a U.S. military base, one truth is becoming clearer by the hour. This will not go unanswered. The United States is not a nation that takes aggression lightly, especially when the lives of its service members are deliberately targeted. Conversations are already underway in war rooms and command centers across the globe. The machinery of response, military, diplomatic, logistical, is being set into motion, and while the missiles that struck may have fallen in minutes, the impact of what happens next could define this era for decades to come. A massive military response is not just expected, it seems inevitable. The pressure is mounting from every direction. Domestically, citizens are crying out for justice. Politicians are making promises from podiums. International allies are urging strength, stability, and resolve. And enemies? They are watching every move we make, waiting to see how power will be projected, alliances upheld, and lines redrawn. But let's not mistake movement for clarity. The world stands on the edge of escalation, and before we rush forward, it's important we understand what response actually means in this moment, because the word itself, response, sounds rational, even restrained. But behind it hides a storm of decisions, troop deployments, airstrikes, economic retaliation, cyber warfare, and possibly the triggering of defense treaties that open the door to broader, more dangerous confrontation. In times like these, we must ask ourselves the questions that history often fails to. Not just what is justified, but what is wise. Not only what we can do, but what we must not do. Because retaliation may satisfy the moment, but escalation can cost a generation. And yet, that temptation is always there, isn't it? The desire to show strength, the impulse to flex might, That very human instinct to return fire with fire. It almost feels like a moral obligation. We hear phrases like, response must be swift and forceful, and indeed, there's truth in that. Weakness invites provocation, but so does uncalculated revenge. History is riddled with examples of righteous responses that spiraled into years of tragedy. The weapons may be newer now, the intelligence sharper, but the danger is the same. Acting so quickly that we forget to ask whether force is being driven by wisdom or by fury. Iran knows exactly what it's doing. This strike was no accident. It was bait. And if we respond hastily, if we meet their chaos with our own, we risk turning a single act of aggression into an expanded conflict, engulfing multiple nations, costing countless lives, and throwing an already fragile region into deeper disarray. The decisions made in the next few days will shape not just our national security, but our national conscience. That's why this isn't a moment for emotional reaction. It's a moment for moral reflection. It's a moment for leadership that is strong, yes, but also smart. Military power is actually most powerful when it's guided by principle, not by pride. When we act with courage, but also with clarity. When we understand that true strength is not just about launching missiles. It's about knowing when not to. And this is where the mention of Kathryn Kuhlman may feel to some completely out of place. What does a spiritual healer have to do with missile strikes and military retaliation? Everything. Because when the world is consumed by power, by fear, by rage, we need voices that remind us what it means to be grounded. Grounded not in protocol, but in purpose. Kathryn wasn't a politician, but she understood people. Deep their pain, their longing, their desperate hope for healing. And while she never stood behind a government podium, she left behind a message loud enough to be heard even now, that in the hour of greatest darkness, there is still a light that shines. If you view this next decision only through a political or military lens, you'll miss something deeper. You miss the truth that we're not just defending airspace, we're defending who we are. What kind of power will we wield? What kind of justice will we pursue? What kind of world are we handing to the next generation? It's easy to rally behind slogans. It's harder to ask hard questions. But this is precisely the time to ask them. What are our objectives? What will this response achieve 5 years from now, not just 5 hours from now? Will our moves honor the lives already lost, or sacrifice more of them to prove a point? These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of vision. And leaders without vision do not lead. They only react. Let us not be driven by the volume of anger, but by the weight of wisdom. Let us not see force as the only language, when strength can also be shown through restraint. A massive military response may be on the horizon, but if it must come, let it be rooted not in revenge, but in responsibility. Because in the coming days, we will not only remember what was attacked, we'll remember how we answered. When the world feels like it's collapsing under the weight of war, when headlines scream of missile strikes and military retaliation, it's easy to believe that power can only be found in force. But in moments like these, when fear is thick and the future uncertain, it's not just strength we need. It's something deeper, something quieter, but no less powerful. That's where faith steps in. not as a retreat from reality, but as the force that gives us the courage to face it. Right now, across the globe, people are holding their breath. Not just soldiers or political analysts, but ordinary men and women who feel the tension in their bones. Parents trying to shield their children from the horrors of what they see on TV. Young people wondering if war is something they'll only read about in history books or something they'll soon be drafted into. Leaders pacing the floor late into the night, knowing they carry the weight of lives with every choice they make. And more than anything, people are asking one quiet, universal question. Where is God in all of this? It's not a question of doubt. It's a question born in pain, the kind of searching that only comes when the world no longer makes sense. And for many, especially those who have never experienced battle firsthand, this moment feels like a breaking point. But if we pause long enough to listen, to really listen, we'll hear something beyond the noise. A voice that doesn't come from a broadcast, a war room, or a political stage. A voice that says, God is still near, even here. Kathryn Kuhlman carried that voice in her own generation. She didn't speak in military codes or sit in diplomatic summits, but her influence reached hearts that the world had forgotten. She spoke in stadiums filled with brokenness of people who didn't come for politics or prophecy, but for healing, for hope, for something that could touch what bullets and strategies never could, the human soul. And isn't that what's at stake now? Beyond all the global positioning, military maneuvers, and political posturing, what this conflict threatens most is the human soul. Our ability to feel, to believe, to love. Because war doesn't just take lives, it hardens them. It teaches us to trust less, care less, hope less. But faith does the opposite. Faith softens what the world tries to turn cold. Faith reminds us that there is more than just what we see. That even when everything around us says, prepare for the worst, there's still reason to believe in the best. Faith isn't fragile, it's fierce. It's forged in fire, in hospital rooms, in droughts, in disasters, and yes, even in the face of war. Real faith isn't about ignoring what's happening around us. It's about refusing to believe that death and destruction get the final word. And in that sense, perhaps faith is the greatest act of rebellion in a world convinced that only violence gets results. Right now, we have an opportunity not just to respond with might, but to lead with meaning. To remember that behind every decision is a soul. Behind every missile image on the news is a mother who will never hug her child again. Behind every plan for retaliation is a generation watching, learning, and shaping their view of what leadership looks like. And what they need to see, what they deserve to see, is that we are not a world entirely lost to war, that there are still remnants of righteousness, voices of compassion, and people brave enough to believe in peace. Kathryn Kuhlman used to say, I believe in miracles because I believe in God. Not a distant God, not a silent God, but a God who shows up when the world expects him least. And it's not hard to believe in miracles when everything is going well. It's when things fall apart that real faith is tested. That's where we are now, in the middle of the test. Will we allow fear to define us, or will we let faith refine us? Because there's something strange and sacred about the way heaven works. It always moves in opposition to Earth's systems. Where the world says protect yourself, heaven says lay it down. Where the world says strike back, heaven says stand firm. And sometimes, in the middle of the greatest chaos, God calls us not to shout louder, but to trust deeper. Trust doesn't mean we avoid hard decisions. It doesn't mean we forget justice. It means we act with the confidence that we aren't alone in those decisions, that even when we don't know what the future holds, we are held. And that is what allows us to move forward, not with arrogance, not with fear, but with truth. So if you're listening tonight and your heart is heavy, if your prayers feel small in the face of so much pain, you're not alone. You don't have to see the whole path ahead. You just have to believe that the light is still coming. Because no matter how loud the sirens, no matter how high the stakes, faith still whispers, God is here.